I'm reminded of what I used to say, and then when we taught study abroad together, what we used to say to students before taking them out of the country. And it's an unintuitive point, which is that, we're going to a land with many fewer lawyers than the land in which you grew up. And therefore, you have to take greater responsibility for your own safety. And I wonder if you want to explore that a little bit, because I think it's relevant here precisely because what we are finding is that cryptically, on actually the most important issues, we here in the weird world, including the US, have been living in a land effectively without regulation forever, even though we don't have like the gringo traps, the giant potholes that you might find on the street in Venezuela, for instance.
Yeah, so let me lay out a bit of the framework here. You have a system in which lawyers are empowered to find harm, to find causes of action, and to pursue it in a court on behalf of a class or an individual who's been harmed. That can result in a very unpleasant relationship with lawyers because they're constantly looking for opportunity. But the point is that system in which lawyers are empowered to get paid for doing this does do a good job of discovering connections that can be established well enough for a court to see them and to recognize them as justifying of a remedy.
Yes.
So we have a system that has been very safe, what Heather's calling a gringo trap. It's a joke. The joke is if you're in Latin America, sometimes you will find a hole in the sidewalk, often with rebar sticking out of it. Right. And the idea is that, any person who's grown up in such an environment is not on their phone in danger of falling into one of these things because actually they've been trained that the sidewalk isn't as safe as it might be. But in an environment where you got lawyers looking for causes of action, the sidewalks tend to be pretty safe. Right. So there is this expectation of safety that is now completely out of phase for anything subtle or delayed. Right. There's an obsession with our safety at the instantaneous level and a complete indifference to our safety in the long term, right? Hence the madness surrounding mRNA vaccines, which were obviously a danger whose full extent we couldn't know for decades, right? And over an obsession with respect to COVID in the moment. This comparison results in a complete mismapping by citizens who feel the nanny state trying to protect them from little things all the time. They don't realize what benefit they get from it, but they also don't realize it does not correctly predict how well protected you are from subtle things, right? They can shorten your life. They can cause your children to have terrible deformities, and you can't prove the connection, so they don't get dealt with.
Yep.
And
it's no one's job to deal with those things. The regulatory agencies would have a very difficult, even if they were actually doing what they are supposed to be trying to do, would have a very hard time establishing causality. The politicians who would go after this are going to be long out of office before anything changes. And, frankly, it's a big part of the appeal of RFK, which is that, he is staunchly pro-human and pro-environment, and has been for a very long time, and is willing to look deep into what long-term trends are and say, you know what? It's not that I'm saying you can't ever put stuff on your crops or you can't ever vaccinate your children. It's that we deserve to have those processes and products be safety tested before we do so. Like, why? How did we end up reversing? How did we end up making the default position be, we're going to add anything we want, and we're going to inject anything we want, and we're going to have you take anything we want you to take, and the burden is on you to prove that it's not okay in order to opt out, as opposed to the default assumption is opt out, don't put that on my food, don't put that in my body until you've actually done the safety testing that needs to be done. So
we have the wrong presumption. You also have to establish these things in a slanted academic environment, right?
Yes.
So, and I want to pick up on the concept of opting out because it's really the central one here, right? Let's suppose that you and I, as biologists, look at this and we say, oh, there's no way that's safe. There's no way that's safe. It is too fundamentally disruptive of biology that is longstanding, etc. I don't want any part of it. I certainly don't want my kids to have any part of it. I want out.
Yep.
You can't even opt out.
That's right.
Right? What would you have to do to substantially opt out? Well, you'd have to stop eating in restaurants. Maybe you'd have to keep your windows closed and filter the air, right? You can't control what people are spraying on their crops and opt out. The point is these processes don't know boundaries. Diffusion happens. The stuff persists way longer than we think it does. It moves around on animals who don't know that they shouldn't be eating something that was just sprayed. So there is no way to fully opt out at all. You can spend a huge effort and a lot of money reducing your exposure, which we do, right? Yep. We do this. And the point is, how effective do we actually...
have been for decades.
Right. And so, yes, you can spend more for organic food, right?
And there is a huge push. There's a huge, presumably industry-sponsored push to make fun of people who insist on eating organic. There's no demonstrated benefit from eating organic.
There's no nutritional difference. We didn't say nutritional difference. We said hazard.
And I also don't believe that.
Right. I don't really believe it either, because for lots of reasons.
Yes.
For one thing, a Roundup Ready crop has, trade-off wise been compromised in order to induce this one characteristic that's agriculturally desirable at a financial level. So yes, there will be nutritional differences, but it doesn't matter if there are nutritional differences. Yeah. What if I don't want Parkinson's disease and I suspect that pesticides are involved in creating Parkinson's disease? How much do I have to alter my life to really eliminate those things? Radically. It's just not possible to do it completely, and to do it substantially is a radical increase in your expenses, and it shouldn't be this way. The fact is, the presumption, and we can get into the precautionary principle. The precautionary principle is logically the right thing. It is a bit difficult to instantiate well. It can be taken to an extreme that
it could be onerous.
It can be onerous, but logically speaking, it's the baseline, right? These things are dangerous until proven safe, and not the other way around. You will never get there in a world where those who have a perverse incentive can gain control over the academic environment, over the legislative environment, over the regulators, right? You just can't get there because their perverse incentive is concentrated. They can disrupt our ability to exert a rational control mechanism every time, and it's what they do, and it's making us unsafe, and we have no idea how much of the obvious ill health that the citizenry experiences. You just stand on a street corner, stand in an airport, watch people go by. Yes, they are living longer. How healthy do they look? What is causing that, right? We cannot protect people from this as long as the industries that make the profit have so much say over what the regulations look like. And yes, that's a very boring and tired point, but it's never going to be untrue.
Yeah.
Right? It's fundamental.
No, and in this, we've said this before, and many others have as well, but we've become ugly. This is just one, admittedly subjective at the holistic level, measure of our collective ill health. But when we were growing up, almost everyone was attractive, and more so even in the 50s, right? And it's not true anymore, and it's sad. And this is not an attack on the individuals who find themselves having been,
maimed is the right term.
Maimed, having been, birthed into a world where there are not the full set of choices to actually opt out, when what we all should have been allowed to do was choose whether to opt in. Mm-hmm. And we have been disallowed from that across domain after domain after domain.